Hello everybody, how are you doing? Welcome back to Improve Your Python. We're going to get straight on. Today we're going to be looking at if statements again. It's our final time looking at if statements. I mean, we could spend another sort of 3 or 4 weeks looking at if statements, but I don't want to dwell on it too long because we've got so much to cover that I want to do with you. But we're covering a few things today to sort of finish if statements off. And yeah, so let's get to it. I'm going to just put the screen on. So open up your favorite IDE. I'm again using the Raspberry Pi one just because it's quite helpful. And yeah, we're going to look at if statements. First of all, we're going to look at what's called avoiding redundant conditions. So what does that mean? So let me just put that in here. Avoiding redundant. And I apologise for the clicky keyboard. I've got a Bluetooth keyboard that just won't connect. It's really annoying. Anyway, avoiding redundant conditions. And yeah, so it is a really common mistake, and I do it all the time as well. And I really have to think about it when I'm writing functions, especially functions. So really, we're kind of looking at functions with this. I know we haven't done functions yet, although obviously, because if you're watching this, you should have basic knowledge of Python, so you will have done functions. But yeah, we'll do it in. This is most helpful for when we're avoiding redundant conditions. It's most helpful when you are looking at functions. So I'll just put that in best with functions. So it kind of goes back to last week when I was talking about, or the week before actually, when we were talking at truthy and falsy values, where everything, if you've got an if statement or even variables, can have a truthy or falsy value. And that means that, if they're not, basically, if they're not blank, then it is true or truthy. And if it's if it is blank, then it's false or falsy. So I'm just going to do a function here, and I'm going to call this isAdult. And we're going to pass it in an age. So take, one guess as to what this function does. It's named really well. We're going to check to see, is someone an adult? So obviously, if you want to copy the code along with me, go for it. If age is greater than or equal to 18, if algae, not age, then we would return true. So we're returning true because if they're greater than or equal to 18, then they're an adult. And we can put in here an else, which we should do actually, because we need to return a true or a false. So we're going to return a false if they're not greater than or equal to 18. So I'm a bit tired this morning. I need more coffee. Okay, so standard, nicely written, don't get me wrong, does the job, is clear, but there is what we call a subtle redundancy here. And what we're doing is here we're checking a Boolean value, true or false. And we're saying, it's either going to be true or false. They're either going to be greater than or equal to 18 or they're not. No problem there. But then we're also returning a true or a false depending on whether this is true or false. So the actual if statement gives us a Boolean value, and then we're saying return another Boolean value. So in this case, it's getting a little bit like, hang on a minute, we're doubling up. So I'll put here, in this example, we have a Boolean result in the if, then creating another Boolean value. So we're kind of like using it twice. We're doubling up, basically. We're doubling up. Someone said, what were you? Oh, hang on. Is it just best to watch or code along? I would try and code along, then you can keep the code and look it up. So can you see what I mean? So we've got our first Boolean value here. And then we've also got another Boolean here. So we're doubling up. And it's always going to be the same. So if this is true, so if our first Boolean is true, then our second Boolean is true. If our first Boolean is false, then our second Boolean is going to be false. So it's the same thing. So that's why it's kind of redundant, because we're repeating something that we don't need to repeat. So effectively what we're doing is we're converting a Boolean into a Boolean. And it's kind of more obvious with these sorts of things when, you know, if you've got integers, it's like saying here, I've got this integer and then I'm going to create another integer, which is exactly the same, and then I'm going to return it. So that's the main sort of issue here. Is everybody okay with that? Does everybody sort of understand what's going on here? Okay, good. So let's look at how we can improve this. So the non-redundant version, we create our function as we did before, but this time, actually, yeah, I'm going to call it something slightly different. I'm going to call it v1, or no, I'll call it isAdult new. We can't call it the same thing. If we called it isAdult, Python doesn't like it. So because all the function names need to be unique. So this time the better version, we're just going to put, we're not even going to put an if, actually. We don't even need to put an if. And this is funny because we don't even need it. We just do return age greater or equal to 18. And that is it. Because if you think about it, what's the first Boolean here? It's this here. We don't need to convert it. We just need to return what the first Boolean was. So if you do find yourself writing a function with an if statement where you're saying return true if this, return false is that, you know, it's, you just need to take whatever the if statement is checking and then just return it. And that's all you need to do. Why couldn't we do that for the other one? What does redundant mean? Redundant means not needed. Yeah. Why couldn't we do that for the other one? I'm not quite sure what you mean. Is it the name? We can test this, by the way, while I'm waiting for that, because obviously there's a bit of a delay. So we can test them. We can say print isAdult 21. Print isAdult new 21. There we go. So we can test that. And actually we'll do it as well with a younger age. So I'm just going to copy that and test it. So let's do, I don't know, 4. Like this. Yeah. Oh, okay. So I see. So why couldn't we do it with this one? Only because I'm just demonstrating it. That's all. It's just this is showing the redundant version and this is showing the new version. So you can compare the difference between the two. So if I run this, it should, when it actually runs, doesn't want to run. Come on, run. What's going on with my, hang on, let me just do a refresh. There we go. Oh, it does not want to run today. Oh, go on, come on. There we go. It worked finally. So you can see they work exactly the same way. They're returning the correct value. So it's another way to sort of just show that you kind of know what you're doing and you know what is going on with conditionals, if statements, etc. So just test that, make sure it works okay. Just do it as a print statement. You don't need to do anything else. Call, first of all, the redundant version is adult, and then the new version, which is this non-redundant version, and test it both sides of the ifs as well. So always, you know, if you're checking something like this, think, is it, if it's true, what happens? If it's going to be false, what happens? So we can use this, good. We can use this, a couple of other examples of this. I've got a couple of other examples for you. Checking if something is an even number. Or if you wanted to, you could do it as an odd number. Well, what we would normally do is we would check, don't do this yet, but I'll do it in a moment. We're going to check if the number, if we do a modulus by 2, then it should be 0. So if the number modulus 2, if it's got a 0 remainder, basically, divided by 2, then it's going to be an even number because all even numbers can be divided by 2 wholly. So all we do is we think, okay, that's my if statement. I just get rid of that if and just put a return there. And that's it. So if you're, I don't know how your brain works. My brain works like I need to kind of do the old version. You can also do a similar one where it's like is odd. We're all odd. Number, and we can say return number modulus 2. Oh, that's the wrong one. Modulus 2 not equal to 0, and that will return if it's an odd number. So that's another couple of examples. And obviously, you know, literally any if statement can be put in that. So someone's asked, what is the difference between using if and return? So only by the fact that we are not doubling up on that redundant value. So remember with this version here, we've got the if statement, and the whole point of a conditional or an if statement is to find out, is something true or false? So we are saying, is this true or false? But we don't have to have an if around it. It could be a while. So it could be while age is greater than or equal to 18, it's still a true or false value. So all we're doing is we're just skipping the if statement and saying this has a true or false value on its own, regardless of whether it's in an if or a while, and therefore we're just literally returning that evaluation instead of doing an if statement. So that's the main difference. We still always have to return something in this case anyway. And it's a good way to speed up your code as well, because if you are having to create, if you're going to have to create 2 booleans, then it has to create that in RAM and memory, and therefore if you can skip these steps where you don't have to, when you don't do that, it can speed things up. And obviously in little programs, when you're sort of a beginner programmer, it's probably not an issue. It won't be an issue because you're just doing little programs and you're learning. But if you're on sort of industrial scale critical systems where you need to make them as fast as possible, then this sort of thing does matter, and it does speed up your code. It's telling you the percentage sign is invalid syntax. Which IDE are you using? And also just double check that you've got, let me just, actually I need to run the code, actually I haven't, yeah, so that's okay. Let me just run the code as well. Let's see, is even, I don't know, 8, and then we'll do a false print is even 9, and then we'll just do the same but with odd. And true, false, false, true. Good, yeah, perfect. Okay, good, good. Yeah, it's probably another syntax error. Okay, so that's if redundancy. I think the main thing is if you've just, like I said before, if you find yourself just doing an if statement with a condition, just think to yourself, can I just return that condition instead of doing the if statement? And 99.9% of the time you can actually just do that. So let's move on to the next thing, and I've actually pre-prepared some code here. Here's some code I made earlier. So let's have a look at that. I'm going to just cut that code out and pull up this code here. And don't copy this code yet. Well, you can copy the code if you want. I'm just going to hide this code so that it doesn't get in the way. Just keep your code there, and just let's have a look at this. So that, because the next thing that we're doing is we're going to look at what's called flattening nested conditions. So flattening nested conditions. So we've got a function here. So I just want you to spend a moment just having a look at this code here and trying to work out what it does. So look at here the parameters we've got coming in. We've got some if statements, we've got an if, a couple of ifs and elses. Just read it for a few moments and try and understand it. So there's a lot going on here. You might, yeah, it's quite hard to read. So don't worry if you're thinking, I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. Let's just have a look at it. It's a function called process order, and it's got 3 parameters: item, quantity, in stock. And we're checking those parameter values. We're checking item. So if item, so that we've done that before, basically it's saying if the item is not blank. So this line is saying if the item is not blank, then we're going to check the quantity. So if the quantity is greater than 0, yeah, good. Yeah, it's shopping thing for buying items. Exactly. Good. So we're processing an order. Good. So if the quantity is greater than 0, so basically we've got something in stock. If something's in stock, then we're going to process the order and return true. So basically, if the item isn't blank, we've got some in stock, and in stock is true, then we're going to process the order. Otherwise, if there isn't any in stock, we're going to pass back it's out of stock, or we're going to say false, it's out of stock. If the quantity is greater than 0, if that's false, then we're going to say invalid quantity. So it could be a minus value, basically, they've entered. You can't have minus 5 items in stock or something. And then otherwise, if the item is blank, then we're going to return no item specified. So a lot going on there, but it's just checking. Yeah. So we could call this, we could say, print process order, and we're going to pass in, I'm going to pass in blank, I'm going to pass in quantity, which is -5, and I'm going to pass in stock, which is false. Okay, so it should fail at some point. So if I run this, it's failed on the first one, no item specified. So that kind of makes true, and it's printed false. So if I give it an item now, so I could say, actually, I'll call it cola. Then I run that. We've got an invalid quantity because it's -5. So let's check that. We've got 8 in stock, but it's out of stock because I put false. So let's change that. It should be true. So we can kind of trace through and see that it's checking each parameter to see that nothing is kind of strange going on. Now, this is absolutely fine. It works. This code works. There's nothing wrong with the functionality of this. As you could see, it worked, didn't it? But it is difficult to read. And there's, here we've got sort of 3 levels of nested ifs. And if at all possible, you need to try and minimize that. It's all fine to say, I've got if and then else, etc. But it is confusing, and it is even confusing for me. So what do we do instead? Well, the best way to deal with this sort of thing, where you're checking things and you've got several things you're going to check, the best thing to do is start basically with the negatives. So we're going to try and make sure that we handle the negatives first rather than the positives. So let me show you what I mean. We need to try and, reach the success. What am I trying to say? Reach a success case and exit early instead of checking everything else. So the best way to do this, someone's asked, how come cola is in quotations? Because it's a string. It's a string. So yeah, it's the name of the item that you're trying to sell, or trying to buy. Okay, so let's look at a better way. So the better way, instead of having those nests deeper and deeper, we want to check for error conditions first, and we're going to exit early. So let's do def process order. So this is, but you could copy this one. I wouldn't copy the top one because there's quite a lot of text there, and we haven't got that long. So we're still going to pass in, process order new. And I'm going to pass in the item, pass in the quantity, and then I'm going to pass in stock, just like we did before. So you can copy the new one, and I'll just put here, better way to check for error and exit early. Yeah, anything in the quotations in the string, anything that's not, could be a number or a Boolean. Some programming languages, they make you, when you define a function like this, so some, in fact, you can do this in Python. I think we did this, but you can, in a lot of programming languages, they'll say int quantity, or they'll say string item, etc. Python doesn't make you do that when you define. I don't know whether that's, which is good or bad, really. I mean, I've worked with languages that do both. I suppose it can be a little bit tricky, but when you're looking at code and you're maintaining code, I think putting the parameter data types into the definition does help when you're maintaining other people's code and you've never seen it before in your life, and you're like, this person's just left and I'm taking over their job, and I'm not quite sure what's going on here. So the better way to do this is we're going to check each one of those three parameters one by one, and then just return false straight away if there is a problem. So we do if not item, so always checking for the negative. We're going to print no item specified, return false. So always like returning false all the time. So then we need to check for quantity. I'll do it as a separate line here. If the quantity is less than or equal to 0, print invalid quantity, return false. And then you can do in stock. So your task is to do the if for in stock. Haven't quite finished yet though, because we have one more thing to do after that if statement. And for this one, remember that in stock is a true or a false. So So we would just do if not in stock, print out of stock, return false. Yeah, good, excellent. Now, we do still need to think, well, if all of those are okay, then actually we still need to do something here, and that is to print the positive thing, which was processing order. But it's never going to get to that line if any of the previous if statements are false, because we're returning false. So let me show you what I mean. Processing order, and we're going to return true. So the way that it works is it will check the item, and if it is blank, then it will return false and quit out of this function. Then if item's okay, it will check the quantity, but if the quantity is less than 0 or equal to 0, then it will exit, return false, and exit the function. Same for a stock. If stock is false, it will just quit out and go back to the main code that called it. But if it gets through all of those 3 if statements, they're all okay, it will get to this line next and say, okay, oh, that's it, we've checked everything, we're going to process the order, and we're going to return true. So the point is because these return falses here, that immediately quits out of the function and goes back to whoever calls it. And you can see if I just do a screenshot of the previous code and I put them side by side, you'll see that actually the new version is so much easier to read and understand. It's a lot more readable, and you know, the logic behind it is a lot clearer. A lot of the time, if you've got things like this, especially if you're a beginner and you're like, oh, I can't get my head around this, I know that I need to remember Julia talking about this in the Improve Your Python. The best thing to do is just get the logical code down into your function and then look at it afterwards and think, how can I do this? I just look at the negative, I'm checking for the negative, the errors, and then change it afterwards. Can I run both to see the difference? Absolutely, yes. Let's run this one. In fact, I will copy that and paste it here, but call the new one. And there you go. Ta-da! So yeah, the best way to do it is, like I said, you're effectively, they call it guarding. So it's called guarding clauses. So I'll put it here, better way to check the error and exit early. It's called guarding clauses. So these are all sort of things you can search for if you think, I can't remember what it was. It's called guarding clauses. Sometimes people call it early returns. And it's just a really nice way to write your if statements. They're the same because logically they're doing exactly the same code. It's just this one will return early. Yeah. So I've got another example for you for this very quickly. We've got 10 minutes left. Is it 10 minutes? Yeah, about 10 minutes, 5-10 minutes. So another example, we've got a nested version. Oh, I've just got rid of that one. I don't need to. Hang on. Let's try another. And this one, in fact, you could try this for me. So here is my nested version. Okay, my nested version is Deaf can vote. And we're going to check the person's age. Are they a citizen? Although technically here in the UK we're subjects to the king, not citizens. Not that I'm anti-royal or anything. Yeah, so we've got if age is greater than or equal to 18, if is citizen is if is citizen, and then we can do if is registered, return true. Otherwise, here we're going to return false. So there's my nested version. Nothing, you know, it's fine, it works. It will work. So if I call it, I'll do print can vote, and I'll, you know, check what's their age, 18, is a citizen, true, is registered, true. So they should be able to vote. I'll just put here, just so that we know that it is the vote function. There we go. Okay, so they're over 18, or they're 18 or over, they are a citizen and they are registered, they can vote. So now what I want you to try very quickly, because we've only got 5 minutes, is to try the flattened version. So I'll give you the start of it. Can vote. New. Age is citizen. In fact, I'll just copy this bit here because that'll be quicker. There we go. I want you to try and just do an if statement for each one of those. So there's still going to be 3 ifs, but they're not going to be nested. So unnest the ifs and return false if they're false. If they're false. Unnest. I've just made up a new word. Unnest. Denest. Denest. That's better. Denest the ifs. It's a good job I'm not an English teacher. I'll just put some more hints here. Checking the if that it's false. Okay, so I'm going to very quickly do this because we're going to run out of time. So what do? We just denest it. I feel like it's been cruel to birds. Denest the birds. If age is less than 18, so we're taking the opposite of the previous one, which was true. So we're saying if it's false, then return false. If not is citizen, return false. If not, is registered. Return false. Otherwise, we're going to return true. So we can call that as well. Here, can vote new. Put new there we go. And it works the same. And you can see it's a lot easier to read, isn't it, as well? It's definitely easier to read. Don't you need to put an else return true? We don't need to put an else because it will just naturally fall through the way that the code goes through. It will just come here, and we don't need the else because we only need it once right at the end if everything else has passed. So we are going to leave if statements for now. Or like I said, there's so much you could do with if statements. And a lot of the time, I think, well, the principles that I've shown you kind of today, that don't sort of double up on true and false, and also try not to do nesting if possible. Exit a function as soon as you possibly can if you're checking things. Yeah, so there's lots of other things as well. Especially with elif, but we'll leave that for now. We might come back to if statements in a future day. I don't want to dwell too long on it. Next week, what we're going to be doing is looking at exception handling. And this is something that isn't in the GCSE or iGCSE syllabus, but it's extremely helpful. And I wish I had time to use it in the GCSE, actually, because it is really helpful. Anyway, we're going to be doing exception handling next week. And we might push on to 2 weeks for that, but we'll see. So I might see some of you tonight at the revision. Otherwise, take care and have a good day.